listening in to BratCon Radio. If you have a question or comment for our guest or host, please call into our program at 1-866-472-5788. Again, that's 1-866-472-5788. You may also send an email to dcampbell@bratcon.com. Now, back to BratCon Radio and your host, Dennis Campbell.
Welcome back. We're visiting with Laurel Steinheist, the author of Marion's Child, the book that we will provide free to the first few callers that call in tonight. Talk to Laurel, talk to Kate, talk to Jerry. We'll give you one of Laurel's books and get it out in the mail to you. When we run out of books, we do have the Brat, Our Journey Home DVD to give as well. So light up those phone lines. Laurel, before we went to break, I wanted you to contemplate about that chapter that started the real Cold War writing on the wall, and that was the Russians walking out. And walk us through that very quickly, and then how you felt after the blockade and anything else during the blockade, and then the Cold War crisis that kind of sunk in to reality as you were graduating from Berlin High.
Okay. The Russians kept walking out. My mother was among those who went to the Kommandantura meetings. There was the Kommandantura building. What I remember about it is always has beautiful red geraniums in front of it in the summer. But that was where the Russians and the other allies, because we all were considered allies at that time, got together to work out the details of Berlin's operations. And at the time, the Western allies were very much concerned about the fact that the Russians had been printing marks, money, without anything to back it up. Mm-hmm. And so they were talking about currency reform. Mm-hmm. There were another couple of issues that were really important, such as that the Russians had the right to pick up any German mail they wanted for forced labor and send them off to Russia. It was a kind of reparations. And when students in our sectors, Western sectors, would go to the university in the Russian sector, a lot of them got picked up and never made it home because they were conscripted for forced labor.
Right.
And then they, it's like Siberia, here they come.
Right.
But those were some of the issues involved.
And then when you got into the settlement of the Cold War itself, and we knew we were right in the middle of the Cold War, how was that?
Well, I remember distinctly. They had the blockade was just over. It hadn't been over long. And they had this big rally in the eastern sector, in the Soviet sector, and it was a world youth rally of communists, world communist youth rally. And there were communists from all over the world, young people there. And the rumor was that we were going to be invaded at that time because the Cold War had already manifested in the so-called Korean conflict. They didn't call it a war then.
Right.
And so the word was that the Russians were going to come and overrun us. Well, I just sort of didn't believe that was going to happen, and my mother didn't believe that was going to happen. And she was pretty close to the center of what was going on. So on the day of the big youth rally, she and I put on our all-German clothes from the skin out, and we went over to the Russian sector.
Wow.
And we, of course, showed our ID, as one must going in, but we were entitled to be there. And it was really interesting because I got to talk to some of the students who were supposedly communist youth from America. And actually, they didn't speak much English. What you had there was you had kids who had been maybe born in America or had lived in America for a time, but had not lived in America recently.
Right.
They had lived behind the Iron Curtain, either in Russia or one of the satellite nations.
Right. Now, I want to pardon me for interrupting.
Mm-hmm.
I want to bring Kate into the picture here because she's a 1985 class year from Berlin High School, so that puts her kind of right in the middle of the Cold War period. Kate was raised as a military brat at Fort Hood. She had moved 10 times before graduating from her third high school. That certainly qualifies as a super brat. She ended her military brat career and didn't stop her nomadic lifestyle, though. She had as many addresses as you can imagine. She's 43 years old now, so she lived in 14 states and the other 16 years in 5 countries over 3 continents. She also served in the U.S. Army as a helicopter mechanic, serving in Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. Thank you for your service. And during Desert Storm, Kate. And it took her 4 different colleges and universities before she completed her degree, summa cum laude, from Georgia Tech. We know how that is when you're moving around and having to attend different universities. She's very active in long-distance swimming and triathlete competitions. And she's a Six Sigma and Black Belt Six Sigma and lean person for 3M Corporation. Kate, welcome to our program.
Thanks, Dennis. Hi, Laurel.
Well, you've heard a little bit about what Laurel's been chatting about in her experiences, and I want to get your take during your experience and time in Berlin, because it seemed to me in reading Laurel's book that Berlin really became what should have been classified as the epicenter of the Cold War. I mean, is that how you felt about it?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the city had changed so much by the time we had been there, with the 60s and the 70s and then even into the 80s. The city was completely cleaned up. It's absolutely pristine. So reading her book, I have completely different visions of what Berlin was like at her time. And actually, where a lot of our parents worked, in Teufelsberg, which is actually German for the Devil's Mountain, that's where a lot of the landfill was built from all the rubble in the city.
I'll be darned. Okay. And now you were in the swim team program we talked about a little bit before the show. So you were going in and out of Berlin on a pretty regular basis to attend swim meet competitions, but that had to be done by duty train and by plane with flag orders and all that. Give us a little bit about that.
Right. So I think one of the silver linings in my experience in Berlin was that we were isolated. We were in this epicenter. We were in this island of Berlin, and to travel to any away games throughout the years, we had to ride what we called the duty train. And in the duty train, you can imagine it's you and all your best friends with a few chaperones that might be causing just as much havoc in their trains. And you're
Those
with
things happened in my time too.
Good to know. Good to know. And it was just a big 3-day slumber party. You're on a night train in the cloak of darkness because you're not allowed to be able to view West Germany or East Germany as you're riding through it. You need to have your flag orders right. You can't have a T before an A.
And that was considered part of the Russian zone, and they're checking your papers and your flag orders and your passports all along the way.
Absolutely. And so there were some tense moments of a few of the trips that we remember, but honestly, as kids, we felt safe. We had a good time, and we didn't know any different. And traveling through on the duty train was part of the fun that we had, and it was part of the camaraderie that I think is special for the Berlin Brats, because we had so many overnight gatherings with our best friends.
Because you were traveling to these events outside of Berlin, you spent a lot more time together than just in the classroom.
Exactly. We'd have, like Friday evening, we would take the night train into Frankfurt. Then we would take a bus to wherever our meets, or if you're on the football team or whatever, and you're sleeping in the gym or you're sleeping at somebody's house, so there's your second night of your slumber party. And then you need to take the train back into Berlin on Saturday night or Sunday night, and your third slumber party.
Wonderful. Good to hear all of those stories and accounts.
Not only that, but because it was such a small base for socializing, every kid was in on everything.
Right. You have such a small group of students there. We've got a caller on the line. Let's go to the phone lines and pick up Maggie, who is an American Berlin graduate, 60 and 63. Maggie, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Maggie, welcome to BratCon Radio. You're live on the air with Laurel, Kate, and Jerry.
Well, I know Kate and Jerry quite well because of the Berlin American High School reunions.
Hi, Maggie.
Hi, Maggie. I was there from 1960 to 1963 which was a very exciting time because of the fact that the wall went up. Later, the 19th Division came in over the Autobahn, and then I was there for John Kennedy's speech, the Ich bin ein Berliner speech.
Wow.
The thing that I'd like to say, I'm going to agree very much with Kate about how wonderful our AYA, American Youth Association, was, and the fact that we only had, when I was there were about 125 in the entire high school, so we did know everybody. The one thing I remember is sitting in classroom after the wall went up and listening to the tanks as they would come up the street. If they went straight, they were going to Checkpoint Charlie, and if they turned to the left the way they were coming, they were going down to the Grunewald for maneuvers. And although no one ever said anything, when you heard the tanks, class just kind of stopped.
I'll be darned.
While we listened to what was going to happen and whether we would be pulled out of school to leave if our parents were in security. So there was that, but then there was also, the day the wall went up, the fact that we went out with our friends and actually watched what was going on from the other side. These very German women, older women, kind of babushka scarves on, and they were beginning to build the wall. And for us, it was just kind of a day off, and for years I felt guilty about the fact that I didn't realize how, what a terrible thing was happening in Germany that time, especially for the East Germans.
Of course.
And that I had just been a teenager enjoying an exciting event that was going on. When I went home, I saw my parents, and the looks in their faces, I realized that there was something very serious going on. And like I said, I felt guilty for years, but later I realized the fact that the AYA, the military, they made us feel like we were regular American teenagers, even though we were in such a hot spot.
And very important to have kind of a pleasant experience.
Definitely. Our relatives were always writing us letters and being concerned about us being there. And I have to say, as a teenager, I was much more interested in the next football game, the dances. I didn't feel the stress or the concern that relatives in the United States did.
Sure. We're going to extend this segment a little bit and bring Laurel back through. Laurel, I want you to tell our callers how they can find your book, Marion's Child, and your other books real quick.
Thank you. My books are on Amazon.com. It's very simple. Look under my name. You'll find Marion's Child. I have a new one that's out called No Denial, featuring historical photographs that my mother wrote for the collection of when she was with the OWI in London. But as I said, I invite all brats to write about their experiences.
Well, I certainly recommend all brats pick up your book, Marion's Child, at the very least, if not all of your books, because it's an incredible read about a child's account from post-World War II there in Berlin all the way through to the height of the Cold War. And Maggie, thank you for your call today, and we will get one of these books out to you very soon.
Thank you very much.
You have such good taste, Dennis, and I'm so modest also.
Well, we've got to run to break and pay some bills, but when we come back, more with Kate Spear and Jerry Glass on BratCon Radio.